What if the reason you're not stepping fully into your power as the beautiful woman that you are isn't because of what you're doing, but because of what you've been carrying? Something unseen, unhealed, and hidden in your past. In today's video, we're diving deep into the 4 core wounds that hold women back. These invisible forces are often the root of self-doubt, low self-esteem, and fear. Stay with me to discover how these wounds are secretly dimming your potential and how you can finally break free. So the first wound I want to talk about is the mother wound. And the mother wound happens when our mother was not very connected to herself as a woman. So because our mother is our relationship to the feminine, because she's the first role model that we meet in our lives that represents the feminine for us, we learn based on what she shows us what a woman is. And the relationship she has with her own body, the way she treats herself, the way she is kind to herself or not, the way she respects herself or not, is all what we are being shown what the feminine is. And this is all imprinted into us. We're soaking it up like a sponge. And later in life, that is our relationship to the feminine and the relationship to ourselves. So if you look at your mother, chances are that you have very similar relationship patterns, very similar level of self-love, self-worth, and a very similar way of dealing with the world and dealing with yourself. So if we want to heal our own femininity and step into our power as women, we have to have a close look at the relationship with our mother, the way he treated herself, the patterns that she's living out in her life or lived out when you were a child. Also very important to look at our whole matrilineal lineage, meaning your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and see what kind of patterns that they all have in common. Because chances are the patterns that are living in your mother have been passed down to her from her mother, and then her mother from her mother, and that's how it kind of works. And it all comes down and then it lives in you until you decide to be the cycle breaker. Because if you don't, then you're gonna keep it on and pass it on to your children, to your daughters. And so I mentioned it before, how you can start to heal this wound is to have a close look at your mom, at her patterns in relationships, at her patterns when it comes to her body, the connection to her own femininity, the connection she has or had to her cycle, to her menstrual cycle, which is probably maybe not have been there, like my mom. And my mom also, she had, for example, quite a bad relationship to her body. She didn't really move her body. She didn't really dance. She had a bad relationship with food. And I inherited all of this, and I developed an even stronger version of it because I developed an eating disorder, bulimia. That's what I struggled with for like almost 10 years of my life. And I was able to heal it because I worked with these wounds. And so if you're struggling with these things, have a look at your mom's patterns and then ask yourself, how am I acting out these patterns in my life? Okay, wound number 2 is the father wound, and I have talked a lot about the father wound lately. If you are curious about more details, I have literally like 5 videos on the father wound, so you can check them out on my channel. And the father wound is, of course, our relationship to the masculine, because our father wound is our role model, our first role model in our life for the masculine. And this relationship is mirrored in our romantic relationships. So the relationship we had with our dad in childhood determines the relationship we have today with men. So if you find yourself struggling with toxic relationships, with attracting the same men over and over and over again, with repeating the same relationship patterns with men, then chances are there is the father wound still active within you. And the father wound is also a very big one that keeps us disconnected from our power, because if we're not in our power in relationships, if we're not able to speak our truth, to set our boundaries, because as children maybe we were afraid because our father would punish us, like me, then later in relationships, that's exactly what we will be struggling with. We will struggle with communication, we will struggle with expressing our emotions, with being emotionally open, with trusting men, with all these things. It's a lot. So if you're interested in this, check it out. Also, I'm actually opening a course that is fully dedicated to the father wound that starts in April. And if you're interested in that, if you're interested in healing from toxic relationships and healing these patterns, so you're not going to be stuck in these relationships anymore, and if you're interested in attracting healthy love finally in your life, then check out the link down below. And you will find a bunch of information, what's in the course and all these kind of things. Wound number 3 is the sister wound. So the sister wound is also a very big one that keeps us disconnected from our power, because women are powerful in connection with other women. It's very important for women to be connected to other women, to be in sisterhood, to heal each other. And so if you're struggling with this wound, you are most likely unable to trust other women, and you compare yourself with other women. So chances are that in your life you've actually experienced betrayal by women, because that is a reflection that played out in your life from the wound that is still within you from childhood. And the way the sister wound was created in your childhood is betrayal by other women. So either betrayal through your mother or betrayal through your sister. I actually have experienced that by my sister, very sadly. And there was a situation that really escalated, and she undermined me completely, and there was just a huge feeling of betrayal, and that affected me much more than I thought. And then later in life I realized that that is actually determining my relationship with other women. And it was also not easy for me to be open emotionally in front of other women, because I was subconsciously not trusting them. Also comparison, like that was a big one that I experienced for myself, like comparing myself constantly to other women, not feeling adequate, not feeling good enough. And so of course this keeps us disconnected from our power. And later in life, when I started healing this wound, my God, it was eye-opening. Like, being in connection with women is such a beautiful experience, and I was like, I couldn't believe that I had missed out on that for a long time. I mean, I had girlfriends, yes, but there was not like a deep emotional connection, you know, like this ride or die kind of thing. And so a way to heal this wound is, again, look at your childhood, or maybe even a little bit later. But did you have any encounters with a sibling, with your sister, where she did betray you? Or with your mother, where you felt betrayed by her? Look again how you're playing this out in your life, so you can start healing this wound. Also, I will go into much more detail with these wounds in future videos. So if you are interested in that, make sure to comment and subscribe. Also, the sister wound can actually be inherited. Like, it can be also generational trauma, meaning it can be passed down from either your grandmother having trouble with her sisters, or your mother, or your great-grandmother, or even from all the way back in the days during the witch trials, because there is a lot of collective and generational trauma that we hold on to within our wombs. So if you haven't experienced any betrayal by a sister in your own life, but you still feel this distrust towards other women, or you cannot really cultivate healthy friendships with women, then chances are something has been passed down to you and it's still being activated within you. So the fourth wound is the witch wound. And the witch wound is a wound, one of the biggest wounds that keep women small, dimming their light and afraid to show themselves and their power. The witch wound is a generational trauma that has been passed on to us through our mothers. Because back in the days, I don't know if you know this, but back in the days, in the 13th century, 14th century, 15th century, and like a long time, there were the witch hunts, the witch trials. And that was, especially in Europe and North America, they're still going on in some places in Africa, as far as I know. So they're actually still happening some places today, but of course not as much. And also England, these were like the prominent kind of countries where the witch hunts occurred. And the witch wound was created in a whole generation of women across the globe, where women were killed, burnt at the stake for their powers, for being connected to the divine, for being connected to their cycle, to their wombs, to their magic. And not just that, but women were also able to save their own butts by betraying other women, by basically snitching on their mothers, their sisters, their daughters, and they could save their own lives doing that. And that's also why the sister wound, for example, can also come from that time. So if you haven't experienced that in your life, in your childhood, then it can also be this generational trauma that has been passed on to you through all these generations. And so the witch wound carries both. It carries the witch wound and the sister wound. And because we were burned at the stake for our powers, for showing ourselves, and for being connected to our divine feminine energy, we were burned. And this is why we created this deep-rooted fear of showing ourselves. This is why so many women struggle with stepping into their power, with being seen, with sharing their magic, with sharing their knowledge, with teaching. There is so much fear around stepping into the light and allowing ourselves to being seen. And if that is you, if you have so many gifts to share and you feel afraid and terrified of being seen in that and being witnessed in your power, then chances are that the witch wound is still very much active within you. And so this can be healed through ancestral healing. So what we do is we go into past lives and then we move that energy through us. So for example, with me, I definitely was a witch in these kind of times, and I was burned and I had actually my tongue cut out. That's something that all came to me. And funny enough, I was reincarnated into the village where I grew up in for the majority of my life, which is a tiny village, which is 700 years old. And there were actually witch trials happening. And I had a long journey with the witch wound. And I had many visions of seeing myself in that life and seeing what happened to me and seeing the fear that it has created within me, because it was not an easy journey to like put myself out there and to share my knowledge and my experience with other women and all these kind of things, being seen online, you name it. Like, it was not an easy journey, and I have managed to heal it through ancestral healing. So I went into this fear and I allowed it to be there. I allowed the fear to be there to fully consume me, basically, and I moved it out of my body with movement, with crying, with screaming. This was not a one-time thing. Like, that was like quite a lot of sessions, but it did absolutely help me to be fully okay with being seen now online and being fully open and fully, yeah, just being actually excited to being seen, which is such a contrast considering that I was shit scared to show myself online. And so I, in my own life, have healed all these wounds. Of course, there's always like a little bit you can dive into here and there if it comes up. But mostly these 4 wounds I have worked with, and they have changed my life. They have changed the way I show up in the world, the way I show up in relationships with my partner. It is insane, the relationship that I have. I cannot believe it. The healthy communication, the not afraidness of sharing really, truly, deeply vulnerable things with each other, the amount of trust we have with each other, the amount of trust I finally have for myself after not trusting myself for shit. Attracting healthy love after I attracted a bunch of unhealthy relationships, the way I express myself so much more free, the way I am in my body, the way I move my body, the way I dance, the way I sing, the way I express just my whole being. And this is what it feels like to be a woman connected to our power, connected to our womb, connected to our cycle, connected to our body, connected to our spirit, connected to the divine. That's like literally what it's like to be a woman. Your relationships will change. Your relationship to yourself will change. The way you show up in the world will change. Everything will change if you heal these wounds. So please dedicate yourself to do the inner work. If you're doing the inner work, you're not only healing yourself, you're healing the women who were before you and the women who come after you. You're not doing just a service to yourself, but you're servicing the whole world, because you are a part of the collective. And when one person rises in her energy, more people will rise, because everyone creates ripples, right? And I noticed that in my own life. So if you want to start healing and you want to start with the father wound, because that's one of the biggest wounds we have, I would say, then check out the course that I will start in April. It will go super into depth. There will be guided practices, guided embodiment practices, shadow work, guided inner child healing. There's a bunch of stuff in there that's going to help you to heal this wound so you can start attracting healthy love. And not just that, but to step deeper into your power as a woman, to reclaim your power as a woman. So check out the link in the description box, and if you're curious, check out this video where I explain how I healed my father wound.